Do you remember the first time you heard the story of the fall of humanity? When you heard it, you probably heard it as a very simple and straightforward story. God created humankind. God created a man and a woman, Adam and Eve. And God placed them in a garden. A garden where they had everything, all laid out for them, where they didn't have to work or strive for anything. And there was just one rule, only one. They could eat whatever they want. They could do whatever they wanted, so long as they did not eat the fruit of one tree at the center of the garden. An apple tree, or at least it was always an apple in the pictures. But of course they blew it. They broke the one rule and they lost paradise. They lost it all. Lost it all not only for themselves, but also for all of us and for all times. And of course you probably heard it was all the woman's fault. She dragged us all down. But that was the story. A pretty consistent, straightforward story. A story that attempts to provide some answers to those key questions that people always ask. Like why? If God created this world, if God intended this world to be a good place for us, why do things so often go so very wrong? Why do human beings screw up so very often? So long as you didn't look too close, this story seemed to provide the answers to questions like that. But as I've grown up, I've tended to look closer and closer at that story, and I gotta tell you, the closer I look at that story, the more I find that it gives me more questions than it does answers. And it's not near as straightforward as I was told. For example, let's just look at that one rule that God puts in place. That one thing they're not supposed to do. Why does God do it? What is the point of that rule? I mean, is it just an arbitrary rule? Is it just a test to see whether they know how to obey or not? Or is it really a rule that has meaning? Is there actually something dangerous or perilous about that tree? I mean, could it have been anything? Could God have accomplished the same thing by saying, you know, you can dip your feet in this stream or any other stream, but not that stream? Or could it have been, you can pick any flower you want, but not that one? Did it have to be a fruit? Because if it was arbitrary, if it was just something to demonstrate their obedience, I'm not sure what I feel about that. Because I've done that. I mean, I'm a parent. And I have, at times in my parenting life, I have just made an arbitrary rule. You know, drew a line in the sand at some arbitrary point, but a meaningless point, right? Who hasn't done that? If you do not turn off the computer this second, you are grounded for 2 weeks. Or if you don't get out the door in the next 10 seconds, you're not going out tonight. I gotta tell you, anytime I've done that, anytime I've drawn just an arbitrary but meaningless line in the sand, I found two things. First of all, that line will be crossed sooner or later. And second of all, I will almost certainly regret having drawn that line in the first place. I do not find that such moments are the most stellar examples of my parenting skill. So is that all that God is doing? Is God just drawing an arbitrary line in the sand and saying, don't cross this? Or is it I don't think so. It must be meaningful, right? It must be a meaningful thing. There must be something dangerous or perilous about this particular fruit. protect them. Surely that must be it. But what could be dangerous about this fruit? It is not, by the way, an apple tree. That's later tradition that decided that. The fruit is described as being the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In other words, the fruit of this tree is symbolic, emblematic of the quest for knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Now, what could be wrong with that? What objection could God have to us seeking after knowledge and understanding and wisdom? We generally see the search and the quest for knowledge to be a good thing. Yes, occasionally, the quest for knowledge and understanding does lead us to dangerous and bad places. You can make the argument, for example, that the world would be a safer place if no one ever came to understand nuclear physics, if no one ever invented an atomic bomb. The world would be safer if no one ever invented landmines or the technology that allows people to spy on other people. So there is a certain perilousness to the search for knowledge, but at the same time, we would never say that knowledge should be outlawed. And we all tend to agree that the search and the quest for knowledge is important and worthwhile. So surely God does not object to the man and the woman wanting knowledge and wisdom. So it must maybe be the particular kind of knowledge that we're talking about. Well, the particular kind of knowledge is, of course, the knowledge of good and evil. That is to say, the knowledge that enables us, as human beings, to tell the difference between right and wrong, good and bad. Once again, you've got to ask, what objection could God have to us wanting to be able to figure out right from wrong? We see that as a good thing. So one of the key things we try to teach to our children, how to tell right from wrong. It's one of the things that makes a good society, a good sense of right and wrong. It's a major tenet in most religions, including Christianity, that we want people to understand their choices and discern which are the right ones and which are the wrong ones. How could God object to something that we see as absolutely essential to a good life? So what is going on here? I can't think that it's just an arbitrary rule that God puts out as a test just to see whether they can obey or not. And what objection could God have to the search for knowledge? What objection could God have us to know, to us knowing right from wrong? Maybe something else is going on here. Let's look how it's described. When the woman is standing there, and she is contemplating this fruit that is before us, this is how the situation is described. So when the woman saw the tree, that it was good for food, that it was the delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took its fruit and ate it. So according to that, the woman took the fruit for 3 reasons. First of all, because it was good, tasty, nutritious food. Second of all, because it looked really nice. But third, and clearly most of all, she took it out of this desire to have wisdom, a desire to be wise. Did you know that the Greeks had a word for someone who desired to be wise? They called such a person a philosopher. That's what the word philosophy means. Philo means love. Sophia means wisdom. A philosopher is a lover of wisdom. So Eve in this scene, you might say, is the first philosopher, the first lover of wisdom. A better title for her than the first sinner. So what objection could God have to the first philosopher? As I look at the story, I am not so sure that it's really a story that's meant to be there to explain to us all the things that go wrong in this world, at least not directly. It is more than anything else a story about what it means to be human. It is a story about the things that we strive for, the things that we desire and work for, and why we do so. That's what Eve is doing in the story. She's figuring out her way in life. And I really see her above all as living up to what she was created to be. For we are told in Genesis chapter 1 that humanity, that men and women both, it says, were created in God's image. And where is that image to be located in the human person? For I do not think that that image is to be found in something physical. It's not that we look like God. It's not that we're the same height or weight or have the same number of limbs. Because God, we are told, is a spirit. So wherever that image of God is in us, it must be deeper than just on the surface. So I've come to believe that that image of God is found in us in that thing that's in us, that makes us want to grow, that makes us want to learn, that makes us create, like our Creator created us. And that makes us want to know the difference between right and wrong. That is the image that God has placed within us. That is how we resemble the divine. And so if that is what Eve was made to be, if she was created in the image of God, what she is doing when she reaches out her hands and takes that fruit is she is actually living up to what she was created to be. Striving for knowledge, striving for wisdom, striving to be able to know right from wrong. I suppose it would be possible for us to be those creatures who bear the image of God without ever stressing, straining, and trying to know more and understand more and to discern the difference between good and evil. But what a waste that would have been. For God put that image within us. We need to live it out. We need to strive for knowledge. We need to strive for understanding. We need to be in that wisdom position where we can know right from wrong. It's how we were created. So I ultimately see Eve living up to being what she was created to be. And yes, that has consequences. And yes, some of those consequences are quite negative. But I don't think if you read the story carefully that it's really about sin and it's about judgment. You know, when God appears on the scene, after all of this goes down, God doesn't appear to bring punishment. God is not angry so much as he is sad, the way I read the story. And what he gives to the man and the woman are not described as punishments, but rather as curses. And we will look at those curses next week in greater depth, but I see them above all as laying out the consequences. They have done something, they made a decision, there are now consequences to those decisions. And yes, some of them are quite negative. But they are also somewhat unavoidable. Eve is this representation of womanhood, yes, but representation of all humanity. This is who we are. This is how we were created. Within us, that desire to be more, to create, to understand, to know, to discern the difference between right and wrong, that's within us. And yes, we reach for that. And there are consequences. I mean, the immediate consequence, we'll look deeper into these consequences next week, but the immediate consequence is that when Eve does that, when she decides to take responsibility for her own decisions and for understanding why she does what she does, she can no longer live in the garden. She can no longer just have everything laid out for her, given to her, because she's chosen to work for it, to strive for it, which means that she and her husband will work, and it will not be easy. But that's the decision she makes. And I'm not going to stand here and tell her that it was necessarily the wrong decision. Yes, it has consequences. But it's also who we are. Eve is the philosopher, the first philosopher, the one who inspires us to reach out our hand for more, for greater understanding. She's the hero of the story. Yes, a tragic hero, because her decision has great cost. She loses the garden. She loses paradise and has to strive and find her way in this world, which is where we as human beings find meaning in this life as we work towards our goals in life. But she loses that paradise. Ultimately, it leads to something greater. It leads to a greater understanding of who we are, who we are created to be. Her decision, yes, does wound that relationship with her Creator. Ultimately, it leads, and she is part of that solution, it leads to a new and better relationship to that Creator. But the initial step is there. Unavoidable. We are all Eve. Let's take a few moments in silent reflection. Yes, oh God, we do strive. We do search after knowledge and wisdom and understanding, and sometimes, yes, those things lead us to dangerous places. But we praise you and thank you that you're with us in the struggle, that you brought us life and hope ultimately in Jesus Christ, who renews that relationship broken and leads us deeper and deeper in what it means to be human and what it means to be in relationship with our God. Amen.